Hey, Jen.
Hey, Jason.
Welcome to my studio, which is your studio.
Yes, it is.
So I wanted to show people, I want to have you on my podcast, but every month I come to the studio, the 9/8 Central studio, and I wanted people to see just a little bit of the behind the scenes about really what they're seeing on YouTube. There's a whole lot behind it.
Yes.
So, just tell me, we're in a podcast bay.
We are.
Kind of how are these designed and what is this about here?
Yeah, so when you're podcasting, sound is so important.
Yeah.
So the walls here are completely soundproof.
Nice.
Over on this side, we've got all kinds of soundproofing panels because we want to make sure you sound your best, right?
Yeah.
And we have, all this uplighting that we can change things to brand colors. So we have the beautiful Businessology brand colors up here.
Blue, I got the blue.
Tons and tons of lights that are they're specifically placed to make you look your best.
Okay, cool.
Lighting is the thing that makes or breaks a really great video, and we want to make sure that you're glowing in all the best ways, right? We have a 3-camera setup. So that helps us narrow in and get really great conversation angles. So we can do tights on you. We can do a nice wide to get the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. And these are all running at the same time. The three, they're always running. And then in post-edit, they just kind of chop it up or whatever they do.
We have some magic tricks and tools that we use in our post-production department to make that all come together really nicely.
Very cool.
Yeah. Cool. And even when you're talking to a virtual guest, which you do pretty often, we're able to make it look like, just a really nice, natural conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that the guys in the room can't hear what they're saying. Like if you were standing in the room, would only hear your side.
That's
so
right.
it just helps for a nice and natural conversation.
Yeah.
It looks great in camera, but weird in the room.
Yeah, it's very cool. And sometimes I do tell the guests, I'm like, we have the engineers here.
Yes.
And they'll come on and there's Zach or Josh will go, hello, can you hear? And they're like, oh, there's people in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, nobody can see anybody, but it's like, I see a whole crew behind me.
Yes.
So.
I always want to just give them a shout out. And when I'm doing a podcast and I always have to I think it's kind of fun to break the fourth wall sometimes.
I do like it. I like doing that.
Yeah. So like you said, though, we do have this whole command center back here too. So we've always got a producer here that's really running the tech. And I think that the tech is probably one of the biggest barriers to podcasting. And it can probably just, there's so many things to think about. And you really want to be focusing on your conversation. So we have our producer back there who can help the virtual guests join, really make sure that the audio is sounding great and the cameras are running, just making little tweaks as they go. And always taking notes too, so that we can pull the best snippets and get all the best marketing for you.
Well, cool. Cool. Well, Jen, thank you for showing me around your studio.
Welcome. Happy to have
and I'm going to have you on the show officially now.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Let's go.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Businessology Show. We gave you a behind-the-scenes view real quick of the podcast bays that we are in when we come shoot in studio for our podcast. But this is really cool. I have a special guest, a couple of special guests coming up in a series, and it is the owners and partners of this studio that we use, these high-end creative people. So I'm excited to welcome Jen Blair, COO of 9/8 Central.
It's great to be here.
Cool.
I feel
Jen,
honored.
thank you for hanging out with me.
You're welcome.
So I've roped you and your partner, Will,
Indeed,
into the podcast. So you're here first, and then Will is going to come in another month, another series. So this is really cool. So we have been using the 9/8 Central studios for a long time, and y'all were in another location, and now we came to this location. So this might be a question for Will, but 9/8 Central, where'd that name come from? He made that up a long time.
He did. But it was primetime TV, so when all the good stuff was on TV, it was usually 9/8 Central. So it's funny because it's a name that people either get immediately or they get very confused by it.
Yeah.
So who watched a lot of TV and who didn't.
Well, I've always gotten it. I thought it was super creative.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be asking Will about a lot of his creative mindset about things. So. But what's really cool is my partner, Julie, and I spend a lot of time with you and Will.
Yeah.
And you and Julie are very similar in the way that y'all look at things. So we kind of saw a behind the scenes, what's really, behind what we do. And I really thought that's kind of a back of the house view of what we do. Operations, COO is this creative role of what happens behind the scenes. So I kind of want to ask you some questions about what the heck goes on that nobody sees.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so let's dive into that. So, the studio 98 Central is it's a big organization. Y'all have a lot of services. Y'all have facilities. You have buildings. That because I wanted to show people.
Yeah.
So when you bring new clients into that, like, how do you onboard them into the service they need or guide them to what they think they need? How do you do onboarding into something this substantial, I guess?
Yeah, there's a couple of different services that we offer. So we have one-off video production, which is usually larger commercial type productions.
Okay.
People come in and they work with us for maybe 3 or 4 months on a bigger project.
Okay.
Something that might end up on TV or broadcast or
Okay.
maybe a larger brand video type thing.
Yeah.
Another thing that people do is they come and do work with us on a retainer basis. So that could be something like social media content. Maybe they do a series of broadcast commercials that they drip out. Maybe there's a resource library or some kind of training videos that they do. So any kind of content that needs to be produced on a continual basis, we work with them as well.
Okay.
And then we have people who do podcasting with us too. So the way that starts, I would say those one-off pieces and the retainer pieces are very similar.
Okay.
And that starts with getting everybody in a room for a strategy session because we need to understand what their goals are and what their voice is like and what their creative requirements are. And so typically we sit down with the client. We love to do it here because we love a whiteboard and we love to get all of the ideas out and on paper. But we usually have a timed agenda that we follow and we get, just a lot of probing questions into voice and brand and all of the creative requirements.
Yeah.
And from there we go into our our order of operations, and that's scheduling. If it's a retainer client, it's trying to figure out those normal rhythms that we put them on for both strategy meetings and shoot dates. We start to milestone out all of our projects. And then do we need, for a one-off, is it locations and casting and all of those deliverable deadlines we like to put in place to make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're getting along the lines.
Yeah.
Podcasting is a little bit similar where we have that same strategy meeting, but podcasting, I think, is a bit less involved on the creative side from us. We really provide the space.
Yeah.
There's usually a lot of questions that people have about podcasting because so many people listen to them, but they don't necessarily record them.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of education and a lot of walking them through what the set looks like and what sort of creative needs to go up on the TVs, what the colors of the walls need to be.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a checklist of logistical pieces. And we give them some advice on how do you start your show? How do you end your show?
Okay.
What's it going to look like when you get it?
Yeah.
So that I feel like is very routine and it's very easy to just walk people through and help them understand all of the elements in the recipe that makes a great show.
Okay.
It's the other pieces that I think are a little bit more involved and they take everybody really from the beginning of our picture all the way to the end. So pre-production, production, post-production, it touches every piece of the company.
Okay. So that's very complicated. So what role – so there's really two. The podcasting is a little bit less of the creative and then there's all the other stuff you could be doing just from the ground up, like creative TV. Y'all do TV ads, things like that. When you're doing that kind of work, the TV ads and stuff – there's a lot of ordering you're doing in dates. So you have a project manager.
Yep.
You have a couple of different.
We have several.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you as a COO move those dates onto their plate? Or are they in the meeting?
Yep.
And kept taking that and then they drive the client through that? How does that work?
Yep, exactly. So again, it kind of depends on what side of the fence somebody's on, if they're working with us for a while or if it's one of those one-off projects. But that initial meeting usually has our producer or a project manager, so our operations manager who really helps to keep all of the trains running there.
Okay.
Will and I will typically be in there for creative brainstorming purposes.
Okay.
And then the client as well. And we just really start to get to-dos and tasks out of that. We have a very specific process for our production that we follow. And it's all in our project management system. It's all written out in a million different spreadsheets. So we know exactly what we need to do. Sometimes we need to write scripts, and so there's a different process that we follow for that. Sometimes we need to book locations. Sometimes we're lucky enough that we could do it here in the studio. So there's different processes for that, especially here in the LED wall, which is something that I think that you'll see with Will later.
Yeah, I want to show that.
There's processes for that because then we need to kind of create our sets rather than going out and finding one. So Lindsay, our amazing operations manager, is the one who just gets all of that going and tasks everything out to the internal team, is that client liaison. So she is one of our, I call them our cruise ship directors, making sure that all the clients know exactly what's happening inside and where all the pieces are. And one thing I tell my team all the time is that as soon as the client leaves the doors, we are a black box. They don't know what's happening here. They don't know the status of their project. And so it is, true. And so it's their job to make sure that they're the windows onto the inside and bringing some transparency to that box.
Yeah, that's cool. I think all businesses have they're a black box to their clients. And probably the more complicated the service, the more black box it is. And you'll have so many moving parts. I love that you call that there's a window, which is kind of you can take a look into what's going on because even that is comfort to the client that things are moving. And I think even in our business, we find when clients go, what is going on? Why have I not heard from you? That alone is just a hit to the client service. And if we could have just shot them an email, just updates, but
exactly right.
Do you just have processes?
We do.
To make sure they're updated?
We make sure we tie dates to everything. You'll be hearing from us at this point. You'll receive this from us at this point. Nothing should leave here without having a date tied to it. So that way we can send the things or follow up on the things, whether it's, we're sending or expecting it from somebody. I have flow charts. I have all kinds of things
You and Julie would have flow charts.
I have milestone lists. So, these are all things too. Like we're constantly learning and we're constantly building them. And we recently on our retainer side just added a project manager not too long ago. And that's really starting to change and shift the dynamic of that team. And so I keep telling the team that as I'm working with them, there's just some things that we maybe haven't figured out yet or don't have quite nailed down. And so the process that we have is going to be evolving. And it's just so important for us to stay in communication and not sit on things or issues if they're coming up or if somebody's confused, raise the flag because we need to figure it out. Especially when we're putting a new member onto that team with a new role that we haven't had before there.
That's interesting. We have a project we just did at work, and it was fairly new for us, and it was pretty bumpy. We didn't deliver it the way we thought we would with a client, and so we had to have an AAR, an after action review. And so I like what you said is when you install some new service, that's some new vision of what you think you want to create in terms of serving a client well, but it's always going to be evolving. So. I used to think, well, I'm going to put the process in, it's going to be awesome. And it never goes that way.
No.
Do you have some form of learning? I guess you said it. You said, stay in touch with me. I got to know this is going to evolve. I got to stay in touch. So do you have some formal way that you will come back and go, how did that go? What do we need to fix? Because learning is a key part of making those things evolve well.
Yeah, we've done a lot of, we call them postmortems. I do feel like that's probably something that we should do regularly or incorporate more regularly. But especially larger projects, we make sure that we touch base on those. We do regularly meet with our team, weekly meetings or biweekly meetings, depending on how long the team member has been here. And oftentimes a lot of those things kind of come out in those too. And so that's that's very much informed our meeting schedule and how we solve through those problems. And like I said, every project touches everybody from the beginning of our process to the end. There's not a single person in the building that doesn't touch something. And so we've built in touch points throughout all of our projects too. So when we have to go from pre-production into production, we have what we call a pre-vis meeting, pre-visibility. And that's when we kind of have that handoff from project management and strategy into production.
Cool.
So
pre-vis meeting. That's cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we have to do that all again for post. So once it goes from production into post, we have to inform the post team. And a lot of the times through those touch points too, we kind of figure out where hangups are and where we need to communicate a little bit better. We have a process too for our one-off projects. Many clients come back to us, even if it is a one-off project. And so what we do is we keep a running list of things that we've learned for each of those clients. So for an example, we have a client who does a lot of home products like sheets and bedding and pet supply type things. And they're very particular about how they like their product to be displayed. So we have a running list that lives at the top of their folder. And every time we have a new project with them, we open that up. And what are the things we need to remember for pre-production? What are the things for production? What are the things for post? And it just helps everybody stay on the same page.
That's right. So the client is not reteaching you.
Exactly right.
Right. That's what you don't want.
Yeah.
Which is
that's the worst. That's my worst nightmare. I never want a client to come back and point something out. Like that's when we have conversations about that a lot.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, it's all of this ties to what we do because in our business we do a big conference every year, and Julie has a lot of thoughts about the design, the experience, the feel, where's catering going. And people have a great time. Y'all have done services at that conference for us. And it's wild. People can really feel the magic of an event like that. But behind the scenes, everybody's working their butt off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's gobs of spreadsheets.
Yes.
It's tons of meetings. And so that's what client service is, the front-facing magic that people feel. It's just so much work.
Right. And that's the goal that we have is for this to feel easy for our clients. Because video production, whether you're doing a podcast, whether you're doing a social media ad, whether you're doing a brand commercial, this is stuff that our clients don't do day in and day out. This is such a new and different world to them. It's very intimidating.
That's true.
There's a lot of gear, as I'm sure that you'll see if you're watching the video portion of this podcast. There's a lot of gear that has to be put together to make this happen. And so we try really hard to make it easy and break down those barriers and make it just seem fun and unintimidating for them.
That's cool. Yeah. I guess I don't think about that, but our business in accounting and taxes, people are doing that all the time. They have to.
It's still scary.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. It's scary for people not really. Yeah. But you're right. Some of that is more common, but this can be very intimidating. A room with cameras, so even as a client of yours, we can have a view of, cool, we want to do a podcast. When you sit in the chair, it's like, ooh, I don't like this. It feels a lot more intimidating. So, and that could even hurt how they work with you, just how they feel, the intimidation factor. So that's pretty cool. So comfort is a big part of the goal for people walking in the building.
Yeah. And even for our podcast too, like you said, honestly, it's Retainers podcast. We always say your first one's your worst one. We set those sessions up, those very first sessions to be more comforting, I guess. We never encourage anybody to come in and knock out 2 to 4 podcasts at once. We say, let's start with one. Let's just come in. We'll do one for your first one. You'll kind of get the ropes. You'll get to watch it back and see what you don't like, or you'll notice weird quirks in yourself. Like I said, I'm always like that one that's like wiggling in the chair, so I have to try really hard not to.
I've figured out my own quirks too in podcasting. So.
And so it just helps them really kind of get that picture, because it's true. The first one is always going to be the worst one, and it's just a learning experience.
Yeah, it's tough. That's wild to have a business where it's going to make people feel intimidated to walk into. So I guess most people know a videographer, which really, I've known Will for so long. That's what he was. And it's these guys who have gear and they go to your site and
flap rim taps.
Yeah, right. There's always this big light hanging and they go and then they film you. But Will took this to something much, much larger. Where, you have an on-site set facility. How long have you been at 98 Central now?
Oh, 4 years in October.
Okay. When you came, you probably like, wow, I got some work to do. Like, what were some of the first things? Like, because I guess Will was in the I don't know how to describe it. It's like it was Will in the past, and then now he's got a partner. And it's like, what were some of the first things you're like, okay, there's this we got to tweak, and how did you prioritize? What did you need to fix first to make this a business that was people, not just Will?
I don't even know where to start with that. Literally everything. Okay. Literally everything.
Okay, you had to. Are you saying you got to rebuild this thing?
Rebuild or just build?
Build. Okay.
There was no file structure. There was no. There was no productivity software whatsoever. There was no standard for literally anything. It was nuts. It was the wild, wild west. I know he's probably going to see this and watch this. Bless his heart. He did very well. He was very successful, clearly. But you bring other people into that mix and you're just like, what is going on here? And there was a lot. There were just moments. I just remember sitting at my desk at like 8 o'clock at night with just a pile of things around me and just being like, what do I even do with
What
this?
do I start?
What do I do? Yeah. So there was a lot of just banging my head on a desk and just, I don't know, just drawing on my experiences. Like, how has this been done in other places?
Yeah.
You know, I'd worked at 2 other agencies at that point.
Yeah.
What made sense? Like, what systems did I like and what did I want to adopt and stick with?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's one of my gifts is I'm just really good at learning from other people's mistakes too, like my own, but also seeing what maybe didn't work and just kind of cherry picking what I feel like is will come together as a good process. And so that's kind of where I started. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I thought you might go, well, I fixed this first, but you had to restart.
I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you where I started.
I think Julie would say the same thing. She would say, Jason's vision was great. And boy, that was a great thing.
Yeah.
And when she came, it was really just randomness.
Yeah.
Randomness and chaos. And you find out you cannot grow a company with that going on.
Can I tell a random side story that will exemplify the chaos? We have a lot of footage and we film for a lot of people. And we often keep their footage for a certain amount of time. So people will reach out to us and say, hey, can I get that footage?
Yeah. Where do you put it?
Right. Well, a client reached out. We did have the Dropbox system, I think that might have been the only thing that we had until you realize the client reaches out and they're like, hey, we worked with Will X number of years ago. He just forwards me the email and is like, fix this. I'm like, okay. Could not find this client anywhere. I could find no record of them in Dropbox. I was just really going through everything. I went through every single folder that we had every single year. And I called Will and I'm like, did you ever work with these people? Are you sure that this is the people that you say they are? And he's like, yeah, there's pudding in the footage. And I was like, what? And
what?
He's like, pudding? Yeah, they had these big cans of pudding. And I was like, what? Okay, so there is a folder called Puddin'.
No.
Yeah, so that's where all the footage
He named the folder.
Yes. Yeah. So, of course, the one client that comes back that wants their stuff is the one with absolutely no easy way. I mean, they had some kind of very, particular food service name or something. I don't know. And, Puddin'.
Okay, so the file structure was not the client's name.
No.
It was Puddin'.
It was Puddin' because there was big pudding on the shoot.
Okay, so that's about what Julie had to work with when she came to work with me. It's like, let's see if we can create any sense of order.
We have a great naming structure. We have a project management system that spits out project numbers so you can track back through everything. It's great.
That's so funny. Wow, that is a good example of what, visionary creatives can... the chaos they can create, right? Yeah. But you need it.
Yeah.
But it needs some order and structure. So, well, are there some kind of processes that you try to stay out of? And which ones do you know I need to be in that? I need to give my voice to that. Which ones are those?
Yeah. I tell everybody I am a control freak. And so I try so hard to stay out of, I really do try.
You try hard. We believe you.
I would say a lot of things really on the production side, I think I've stepped out until, when somebody raises a flag and says this thing isn't working, that's when I step back in. Okay. But Lindsay, our project manager, our operations manager, extremely competent at what she does and has been running that ship so well. Our production team, who some of them may be in the room, are also just incredibly good at what they do. And they're running that so well. There's things that just need to be figured out sometimes that might break, or maybe a process isn't making sense anymore. And so that's when I can come in and really help there. I'm very involved in post in our
Okay.
retainer services.
Okay.
And so
why is that? Is that a value thing? You're like, I want them to get the value, and that's where you kind of deliver it.
I mean, that is kind of not in post necessarily, but on the content side is my strength, and that's where my background comes from.
Okay.
And so I'm just very tied to that, and we have a young team that is so talented, but just guiding them through that and helping them get better at their jobs.
So that review is just a place you need to be.
Yeah.
That's where you can teach and things like that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool. Okay. Well, there is a lot to this organization. Unlike a lot of videographers, as I've said, that's a word I use to just describe somebody who comes and shoots a video for you, which Will did for me, almost a decade ago. So to see what he turned it into is wild.
Yeah.
I guess, we're learning a lot from some of the chaos that can come through business. So just as I wrap this up, I want to ask you this, and probably something I recognize in our own business as a client is that even on the recurring side, you can calendar all of this.
Yeah.
But in our life, things happen, and this is a place where we'll push through and change things. And so is that true about all clients, even the big shoots, like an on-site? Y'all do a lot of planning, but there's always changes.
Yeah.
And that seems to be common for us because we're always navigating our own world.
Yeah.
And we're going, can't do the podcast there. We got to move it. And for us, we just need to move a podcast.
Yeah.
And it's a whole worldwide change for y'all.
Oh, yeah.
Do you deal with change from clients all the time, or does
constantly.
Anybody just lock it in and go?
Oh, no. I mean, it's constant. I mean, we, like you guys, we try to get our calendar strategy. We have a calendar strategy, and we try to get it locked in for the next year by like October. That's when we start talking to our clients about their studio time.
Yep.
And another teammate of mine and we have been working so hard to just kind of make sense of our calendar and what makes sense for how many shoots can we have a week and what makes sense for our capacity. Because even when we start piling in shoots, one right after the other, you need so much time for pre-production. You need time for planning. Our content team who plans most of our retainer shoots, they need to write calendars and write content and get inspiration and make their shoot plans. And the production team needs to wrap their brains around the production. They need to pack gear. They need to look at all of the inspiration and understand it and make a shot list. And so, we can't be producing all the time, and we have to just be, or we can't be holding cameras, I guess, all the time and on set all the time. And so we have to be so mindful about how we kind of domino in those shoot days. And so that's been just a really big thing to figure out for us this year that we've been working so hard on because it's just so easy to let capacity run amok in that way because we don't have a lot of like set it and forget it things. We need people there. And we have to watch that very tightly. And because we know that client schedules are fluid too, we want to make sure that we have the availability for them to be able to move around. So we've come up with I think a pretty good plan for how to let people float and still fit it all in. Which is great.
Well, y'all flex with us when we're needing to flex in our world. So, but we know that it must change everything. So it's very cool. Well, cool. Well, Jen, that was a cool rundown, kind of a behind the scenes ops and all that takes. I know we didn't even touch on the surface of it. There's a million different things, but I thought it would be cool that our all of our listeners saw a little bit behind the scenes of what we've been shooting in the studio for so long. So
it's cool to show everybody.
Thank you for joining us on the Businessology Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very cool.